The motor park was alive with noise. Buses honked loudly, traders called out their goods, and parents gave last-minute advice to their children. It was the first day after the Christmas holidays, and students from St. Mary's College were gathering to catch their bus back to school. Among them was Ada, standing quietly with her bag slung over her shoulder. Ada wasn't like the others. She didn't have the loud laughter or flashy clothes some of her classmates showed off. She was simple, with her hair braided neatly and her Bible tucked under her arm. As the noise buzzed around her, she whispered a short prayer under her breath. She always prayed before traveling. It was something her mother taught her. "Look who brought her entire church to the park." A loud voice rang out, cutting through the crowd. Ada turned and saw Chaik approaching, flanked by his friends Tola and Ikena. Chaik was the type of boy who always wanted attention. He walked with a confident swagger, and his voice always seemed louder than it needed to be. Tola, chewing gum noisily, giggled. "Ada, are you trying to pray the potholes off the road?" she teased, and Ikena let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. Ada smiled politely but didn't respond. She knew how these things went. If she answered, they'd just mock her more. Instead, she clutched her Bible a little tighter and looked at the bus they were meant to board. Chaik wasn't about to let her silence go. "Come on, Ada. Don't be shy. Say a prayer for us," he said, raising his hands dramatically like he was at a revival. The other students, drawn by Chaik's booming voice, started to gather around. Some laughed. Others just watched. Ada felt the heat rising to her cheeks, but she stayed calm. "It's not a bad thing to pray before we travel," she said quietly, her voice barely louder than the noise of the park. Chaik smirked. "Not a bad thing? Ada, this is 2025. Nobody has time for that old school stuff. You think God is sitting in the bus with us?" Ada didn't reply, but she looked at him, her expression serious. "It doesn't hurt to ask for his protection," she said after a pause. Chaik rolled his eyes and turned to the others. "Protection? From what? It's not like we're flying to America. We're just going to school." His friends roared with laughter, and even some of the bystanders chuckled. "Let's go, holy girl," Tola said, mimicking Ada's tone. "Pray us to school safely. Maybe God will give us free snacks on the way too." The crowd was enjoying the show, but Ada didn't let their teasing bother her. Instead, she stepped aside and quietly muttered a prayer to herself. She wasn't praying for snacks or even for herself. She prayed that everyone would make it to school safely, even those laughing at her. Chaik noticed her lips moving and nudged Ikena. "Look, she's actually doing it. She's calling angels to push the bus," he said, doubling over with laughter. The driver of the bus, an older man with a stern face, walked over and clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "All of you, get on the bus. We're already late," he barked. The students scrambled to get their bags and climb aboard. Ada took her seat near the front, next to the window, while Chaik and his friends claimed the back row as usual. As the bus engine roared to life, Chaik leaned out of the window and shouted, "Don't worry, Ada. If we hit a bump, I'll shout hallelujah for you." The bus erupted in laughter, and Ada sighed softly. Inside the bus, the mood was lively. Chaik and his crew were cracking jokes. Tola was playing music on her phone, and Ikena was loudly mimicking the driver's gruff voice. Ada tried to focus on the trees whizzing past the window, but it was hard to ignore the noise behind her. "Chaik, do you think the angels will fly behind us or sit on the roof?" Tola asked, laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach. "They're probably too busy for this boring trip," Chaik replied. "Ada's prayer is wasting their time." The driver glanced at the rearview mirror and frowned. "You kids better calm down. These roads aren't safe," he warned. But his words fell on deaf ears. Ada turned slightly in her seat and spoke up. "You should listen to him. The roads are wet from the rain earlier." Chaik leaned forward dramatically. "Oh, Saint Ada has spoken. Everyone, sit quietly and fold your hands, or she'll report us to God." The back row burst into laughter again, and Ada shook her head, turning back to the window. She didn't like how they were acting, but she also knew there wasn't much she could do to change their minds. As the bus rolled on, the sky started to darken. The once sunny day was quickly turning gloomy, and a light drizzle began to fall. The driver turned on the wipers and slowed down, but the students at the back were still as loud as ever. "Driver, why are you moving like a snail?" Akena called out. "Do you think the rain is acid?" The driver clenched his jaw and kept his eyes on the road. "If you want to drive, come and take the wheel," he muttered under his breath. Ada glanced back again. "You should really stop distracting him," she said firmly. Chaik leaned back in his seat and smirked. "Ada, relax. God's got us, right? Or were your prayers not enough?" Before Ada could reply, the bus hit a bump, causing everyone to jolt in their seats. "See? Even God is shaking us up," Chaik shouted, sending the back row into another round of laughter. The driver glared at them in the mirror. "This is not a joke. These roads are dangerous, and if you keep acting like this, you'll regret it." For a brief moment, the laughter died down, and a heavy silence filled the bus. But it didn't last long. Chaik started humming a tune, and soon his friends joined in, making up silly lyrics about the bumpy ride. Ada leaned her head against the window, praying silently again. She didn't pray because she was scared for herself. She prayed because something in her heart told her they weren't safe. "God, please keep us safe," she whispered. "Even if they don't believe, please protect them too." As the rain picked up and the bus continued down the slippery road, Ada couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The rain started to fall harder, tapping against the windows like tiny drumbeats. Inside the bus, the mood was still loud and chaotic, especially in the back where Chaik and his group were seated. Tola was scrolling through her phone, blasting music that filled the entire bus. Ikena, leaning against the window, was imitating the driver's stern voice. "Hold tight, everybody. This bus is going to heaven," Ikena announced loudly, making Tola and Chaik burst into laughter. Ada tried to focus on the road ahead, but the noise was hard to ignore. She turned slightly in her seat and called out, "You really should stop. This isn't funny anymore." Chaik leaned forward with a smirk on his face. "Relax, Ada. Why are you so tense? Did you see a vision or something?" "No," Ada replied calmly, "but it's raining, and the roads are slippery. You should listen to the driver." Akena chuckled and looked at Chaik. "Did you hear that? Our saint has spoken again. Maybe we should all start praying right now." "Good idea," Tola added, giggling. She clasped her hands together in mock prayer. "Dear Lord, please make this bus faster, so we can leave Holy Ada alone." The group erupted in laughter again, and Ada turned back to the front, deciding it wasn't worth arguing. She looked at the driver, who was gripping the wheel tightly, his eyes focused on the road. "Young lady," the driver said to Ada without looking away from the windshield, "don't mind them. Some people won't understand the importance of peace until trouble comes." Ada nodded silently. She wanted to say something to the others again, but she knew they would only turn it into another joke. Instead, she leaned her head against the window and whispered another prayer. The bus jolted slightly as it hit a small pothole, causing a few students to yelp in surprise. "Driver, are you sleeping?" Chaik shouted, laughing as he held onto the seat in front of him. The driver frowned and glanced at the rearview mirror. "If you know what's good for you, you'll keep quiet and sit still. This is not a playground." But Chaik wasn't about to back down. "Playground? No, this is a church bus. Let's all sing a hymn for Saint Ada." Ikena immediately started singing off-key, making Tola laugh so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. The noise grew louder, and the driver shook his head in frustration. Ada turned around again, her voice a little sharper this time. "Why are you all behaving like this? Do you think this is a joke?" Chaik raised an eyebrow. "Why are you so serious, Ada? Nothing is going to happen. It's just rain. Or do you think God is sending us a warning because we didn't pray?" "That's not the point," Ada replied firmly. "The point is that you're distracting the driver, and that's dangerous." Tola leaned forward, a mocking smile on her face. "Dangerous? Ada, relax. If anything happens, we'll all just fly to heaven together, right?" The back row roared with laughter again, and Ada sighed deeply. She turned back around, deciding to let them be. But her chest felt tight, and her stomach churned with unease. Something didn't feel right. The rain was coming down harder now, making it difficult to see through the windshield. The wipers moved back and forth frantically, but the road ahead was still blurry. The driver slowed down, muttering to himself as he navigated the slippery bends. At one point, the bus skidded slightly, and a few students gasped in alarm. "Hey! Careful up there!" Chike shouted, though there was a nervous edge to his voice this time. "I warned you," the driver snapped. "This road isn't safe in the rain, and all your noise isn't helping." The bus fell quiet for a moment, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Even Chike didn't have a comeback right away. But the silence didn't last long. Ikenna nudged Chike and whispered something, and soon they were both laughing again. "Come on, guys. Let's not let the rain kill the vibe," Chike declared, trying to lighten the mood. Tola rolled her eyes. "See? Even the rain can't stop us. This bus is indestructible." Ada clenched her hands tightly in her lap, fighting the urge to speak again. She knew they wouldn't listen. Instead, she closed her eyes and prayed silently, her lips moving in quiet whispers. The road ahead was narrow, with sharp bends that required careful maneuvering. The rain had turned the dirt patches into mud, making the tires slip every now and then. The driver was doing his best, but the tension on his face was clear. "Everybody sit properly," he said, his voice gruff. "I'm not joking. This rain is serious." Ada straightened up immediately, but the back row only half listened. Chike leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed. "The rain is serious, but we're not scared," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Tola and Ikenna to hear. "Of course not," Tola agreed. "We've got Saint Ada praying for us, remember?" Ada turned her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "You'll regret this attitude if something goes wrong," Chike scoffed. "Ada, nothing is going to happen. Stop acting like a prophet of doom. We'll be at school before you know it." The driver suddenly slammed on the brakes, and the bus skidded dangerously close to the edge of the road. Everyone screamed as the tires struggled for grip. "What's going on?" Chike shouted, his earlier confidence replaced by panic. The driver didn't answer immediately, his hands gripping the wheel tightly as he brought the bus to a shaky stop. He exhaled sharply and looked back at the students. "There's a big pothole ahead. If I hadn't slowed down, we would have gone straight into it," the students murmured nervously, and for the first time, Chike and his group were silent. The driver leaned back in his seat and glared at them. "I've been warning you since we left. If you don't behave yourselves, you'll put everyone in danger." Ada turned to look at Chike, her expression serious. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You need to stop playing around." Chike avoided her gaze, muttering something under his breath. Tola and Ikenna exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier laughter now replaced with tension. The driver restarted the bus, and the journey continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The rain showed no sign of letting up, and the once lively bus was now quiet except for the sound of the wipers and the occasional muttered prayer from Ada. Deep down, she hoped they would make it to school safely, but the uneasy feeling in her chest wouldn't go away. The rain kept pouring, and the once lively bus was now filled with silence and tension. The wipers moved back and forth quickly, but they could barely keep up with the downpour. The road ahead seemed endless and slippery, and the sharp bends came without warning. The driver was focused, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel, his lips pressed into a thin line. At the back of the bus, Chike sat with his arms crossed, staring out the window. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a frown. Tola and Ikenna exchanged glances but didn't say much. For the first time since they left the motor park, the group looked uneasy. Ada, sitting near the front, glanced over her shoulder and saw their faces. She wanted to say something, but she held back. She had already warned them enough, and now it seemed like they were finally starting to understand the seriousness of the situation. The driver's voice broke the silence. "Everybody better hold on tight. This stretch of road is bad even on a good day, and this rain is making it worse." The students shifted in their seats, gripping the edges nervously. Even Chaik adjusted his posture, his earlier confidence now replaced by quiet apprehension. The bus continued to navigate the narrow, winding road. Occasionally, the wheels would slip slightly, causing the bus to jerk and the students to gasp in fear. The tension grew with every swerve, every skid, and every sharp turn. "Driver, are you sure you can handle this?" Ikenna asked, his voice shaky for the first time. The driver didn't look back. "I've been driving this route for years," he said gruffly. "But even the best driver can't control the rain. So sit tight and keep quiet." Chaik leaned forward, his voice low. "Maybe we should have listened to Ada," he muttered almost to himself. Tola, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, gave him a side glance. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You know what I mean," Chaik said, looking at her. All her talk about being careful and praying. Maybe she was right. Ikenna let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on, Chaik. You're not serious, are you? This is just rain. Nothing's going to happen." Chaik didn't respond, and Tola looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. The earlier laughter and jokes were long gone, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. Up front, Ada kept her eyes on the road ahead. The rain had turned into a storm, with loud claps of thunder and flashes of lightning cutting across the sky. She could feel the tension in the bus, and she knew everyone was on edge, even if they didn't want to admit it. The driver slowed the bus as they approached a sharp bend. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "This corner is tricky," he muttered, mostly to himself. "If we're not careful..." Before he could finish his sentence, the bus hit a patch of mud, and the tires lost their grip. The bus skidded dangerously close to the edge of the road, and the students screamed as they were thrown to one side. "Hold on," the driver shouted. His voice panicked as he struggled to regain control. Ada gripped the seat in front of her, her heart pounding. "God, please help us," she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling. The bus finally came to a shaky stop, and for a moment, there was complete silence. The students were frozen in their seats, too scared to move or speak. The only sound was the rain pounding against the roof and the driver's heavy breathing as he clutched the wheel. "Is everyone okay?" the driver asked after a few moments, his voice hoarse. There were murmurs of yes and shaky nods, but the fear on everyone's faces was clear. Even Chaik, who was usually full of bravado, looked pale and shaken. Tola turned to Ikenna, her voice trembling. "I told you this wasn't just rain. This is serious." Ikenna didn't reply. He was staring out the window, his hands gripping the edge of his seat tightly. Chaik finally spoke up, his voice quieter than usual. "Driver, are you sure we can keep going? Maybe we should stop and wait for the rain to calm down." The driver shook his head. "We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no safe place to stop. We just have to keep going and hope for the best." Ada turned around in her seat, looking directly at Chaik and his friends. "Do you understand now?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "This is why I said we needed to be careful. This is why I prayed." Chaik met her gaze, his usual smirk nowhere to be found. "Yeah, we get it," he muttered. "You were right. Okay?" Ada didn't respond. She just turned back to the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could feel the fear in the air, and she knew that things could still get worse. The bus started moving again, slower this time, but the tension was still high. Every time the tires slipped or the bus jolted, the students would gasp and clutch their seats. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, and the road ahead seemed more treacherous with every mile. Chaik leaned forward, his voice low. "Tola, do you think Ada's still praying?" Tola looked at him, her eyes wide. "I hope she is," she said quietly. "Because right now, I think we need all the help we can get." The journey continued, but the mood in the bus was completely different now. The students who had been laughing and joking earlier were now silent, their faces pale and tense. Even the driver, who had been gruff and no-nonsense, looked worried as he navigated the treacherous road. Ada kept her eyes on the road ahead, silently praying with every bump and jolt. She didn't say anything, but she could feel the weight of everyone's fear pressing down on her. As the bus approached another sharp bend, The driver slowed down even more, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. "Everybody hold on," he said, his voice steady but tense. "This is going to be tricky." The students gripped their seats, their breaths held as the bus crept around the corner. The rain was coming down harder than ever, and the sound of thunder echoed loudly in the distance. "God, please keep us safe," Ada whispered again, her voice barely audible over the storm. And with that, the bus continued its slow, tense journey, the fear of what might happen next hanging heavy in the air. The bus trudged along the muddy road, and the rain continued to hammer down. The wipers squeaked as they fought against the heavy water pouring onto the windshield. Inside the bus, it was silent now, except for the occasional sound of thunder booming outside. No one dared to speak. The fear from earlier had taken hold of everyone. Ada sat at the front, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She whispered softly to herself, her lips barely moving. "God, please protect us. Help us get through this safely." The driver glanced at her from the corner of his eye. He didn't say anything, but the grim expression on his face showed that he was just as worried as everyone else. At the back of the bus, Chaik leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His usually cocky grin was gone, replaced by a look of unease. Tola and Ikena sat beside him, both staring out the window, their faces pale. "You think we'll make it?" Tola whispered, breaking the silence. Chaik didn't answer immediately. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a shaky breath. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Ikena, usually the loudest of the group, was unusually quiet. He looked at Chaik, his voice trembling. "This isn't funny anymore, man. I don't like this. That bend back there almost threw us off the road." Chaik nodded. "Yeah, I know." He glanced toward the front of the bus, where Ada sat, her head slightly bowed. Maybe she was right. Maybe we should have prayed." Tola scoffed, but her voice lacked the usual sass. "What's praying going to do now? It's not like it'll stop the rain or fix the road." "Maybe not," Chaik said, his tone softer than usual, "but it wouldn't hurt either." Suddenly, the bus jolted as it hit a deep pothole. Everyone screamed, grabbing onto their seats for support. "Hold on," the driver shouted, wrestling with the steering wheel as the bus skidded on the slippery road. Ada clutched the seat in front of her, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the terrified cries of her classmates behind her, but she didn't turn around. Her lips moved faster now, whispering a desperate prayer. The bus swerved dangerously close to the edge of the road, where a steep drop awaited. The driver managed to steer it back to the center just in time, but the tires slipped again, and the vehicle rocked from side to side. "God help us!" someone screamed from the back. "I told you to keep quiet and sit still," the driver barked, his voice filled with frustration and fear. "You're making things worse." The bus finally came to a shaky stop, and for a moment, there was silence again. Then, all at once, the students erupted in panic chatter. "We need to get out of here," Tola cried, her voice shaking. "Get out? And go where?" Ikena snapped. "We're in the middle of nowhere." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Tola shot back, her eyes wide with fear. "Be quiet, all of you," the driver yelled, slamming his hand on the dashboard. "I'm trying to think." Ada turned around in her seat, her voice calm despite the fear in her eyes. "Everyone needs to calm down," she said firmly. "Panicking won't help." Chaik looked at her, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Calm down? Ada, we almost went off the road. How are we supposed to calm down?" "You have to," Ada insisted. "If we keep shouting and moving around, we'll only distract the driver more." "She's right," the driver said, his voice still tense. "The last thing I need is more noise. Just sit down and keep quiet while I figure this out." The rain didn't let up, and the road ahead looked even worse. The driver gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes darting between the windshield and the rearview mirror. "Listen," he said, his voice gruff. "We're gonna keep moving, but I need everyone to stay in their seats and stop fooling around. If anyone starts shouting again, I swear I'll stop this bus and leave you here." No one argued. The fear in his voice was enough to keep them silent. As the bus started moving again, Chaik leaned closer to Tola and Ikena, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we need to do something. Like what? Tola asked, her brows furrowed. I don't know, Chaik admitted. But we can't just sit here and wait for something bad to happen. Maybe we should pray, Ikena said hesitantly. Tola looked at him in surprise. You? Pray? Since when? I don't know. Ikena snapped. But Ada's been praying this whole time. And she seems, I don't know, calmer than the rest of us. Maybe it's helping her. Chaik nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe it is. Up front, Ada continued to pray silently, her hands clasped tightly together. She didn't know if anyone was watching her, and she didn't care. All she wanted was for them to make it to school safely. God, she whispered, please, keep us safe. Even if they don't believe, even if they mock you, please protect them too. Behind her, Chaik watched her for a moment before glancing at Tola and Ikena. All right, he said, taking a deep breath. Let's do it. Do what? Tola asked, confused. Pray, Chaik said. Tola stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Are you serious? Yes, I'm serious, Chaik snapped. Look, we've tried everything else. Joking, ignoring it, pretending it's not a big deal. And none of it worked. Maybe this will. Ikena nodded. He's right. We don't have anything to lose. Tola hesitated, then sighed. Fine, but I don't know how to pray. Just say whatever's in your heart, Chaik said, his voice softer. The three of them bowed their heads, their voices low and hesitant as they began to pray. The bus continued its slow journey, and the tension began to ease slightly. Ada glanced over her shoulder and saw Chaik, Tola, and Ikena with their heads bowed. She smiled faintly, her heart feeling lighter for the first time since they left the motor park. Maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The bus rolled on slowly, the rain still pouring as if the heavens wouldn't run out of water. Inside, the students were quiet now, their earlier laughter and chatter completely gone. The storm outside seemed to mirror the fear sitting heavily in everyone's chest. The wipers moved back and forth tirelessly, but the windshield still looked like it had a veil of water over it. The driver squinted as he steered, every nerve in his body tense. Chaik sat back, his head resting against the window. He wasn't talking anymore, and his usually loud personality had dimmed. His friends, Tola and Ikena, were equally silent. Ada sat near the front, her hands clasped together tightly as she prayed softly. The only sound inside the bus was the occasional rattle of the windows when the bus hit a bump, or the low whispers of students muttering their own prayers. It was clear now that everyone had realized how serious the situation was. Suddenly, the bus hit another pothole, jerking everyone out of their thoughts. Some students yelped in fear, holding on to their seats. Driver, please be careful, a voice called from the middle of the bus. The driver didn't respond immediately, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. I'm doing my best, he said through gritted teeth. This road is a mess, and this rain isn't helping. Ada turned slightly in her seat to glance at the other students. Their faces were pale, and some of them had tears streaming down their cheeks. Even the boys who had been making fun of her earlier looked scared now. Are we going to make it? Tola whispered to Chaik, her voice trembling. Chaik didn't answer at first. He stared out the window at the dark trees that lined the road, his face grim. I don't know, he finally said, his voice low. I really don't know. Ikena shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I wish we hadn't acted like fools earlier, he muttered. Tola sighed. What's the point of regretting it now? It's not like we can go back and change anything. The bus swerved slightly as the tires slipped on the wet road again. Ada gripped the seat in front of her, her heart racing. She turned to the driver. Sir, is there any way we can stop somewhere and wait for the rain to ease? The driver shook his head without looking at her. There's nowhere safe to stop around here. We're in the middle of nowhere. The best thing we can do is keep moving and hope we get to a better part of the road soon. But what if the road gets worse? Ada asked, her voice trembling. The driver glanced at her briefly, his face serious. Then we'll deal with it when we get there. For now, just pray we don't get into trouble. At the back of the bus, Chaik sat up straighter and glanced at his friends. Maybe we should apologize, he said quietly. Apologize? Tola asked, raising an eyebrow. To Ada, Chaik explained. And maybe even to God. We've been acting like idiots, and now look at us. Akena nodded slowly. You're right. We shouldn't have made fun of her. She was just trying to help. Tola sighed and crossed her arms. Fine. Let's apologize. Not like it's going to change anything, but it's the right thing to do. Chaik cleared his throat and leaned forward, trying to get Ada's attention. Hey Ada, he called softly. Ada turned around, her expression cautious. What is it, Chaik? Chaik scratched the back of his head, looking sheepish. I wanted to say I'm sorry for making fun of you earlier. You were right about everything and we were wrong. Akena chimed in, his voice sincere. Yeah, we're really sorry, Ada. We should have listened to you instead of acting like clowns. Tola nodded reluctantly. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have joined in on the teasing. Ada blinked, surprised by their sudden change in attitude. She looked at each of them, her face softening. It's okay, she said gently. I forgive you. Thanks, Chaik said, his voice almost a whisper. The bus hit another bump, and the students clutched their seats again, some letting out nervous gasps. The tension in the air was almost unbearable now. God, please help us, someone whispered from the middle of the bus. Hearing that, Ada turned to Chaik and his friends again. You can still pray, you know, she said quietly. Chaik nodded. Yeah, I think we should. Tola glanced at him. You're serious? Yes, Chaik replied firmly. If praying will help, then I'll do it. I don't care if it makes me look stupid. Ada smiled faintly. It doesn't make you look stupid. It shows that you're humble enough to ask for help when you need it. The three of them bowed their heads, their voices low as they began to pray. It wasn't perfect, and their words stumbled at times, but it was sincere. God, Chaik began, his voice shaky. Please forgive us for mocking you and for mocking Ada. We were wrong. Please protect us and help us get to school safely. Tola and Ikena mumbled their own prayers, their voices barely audible. Up front, Ada closed her eyes and continued her own prayer, her lips moving silently. The bus crept along the treacherous road, and for a moment, it seemed like things were calming down. But then, without warning, the tires skidded again, and the bus began to tilt dangerously to one side. Hold on, the driver yelled, his voice filled with panic. The students screamed as the bus lurched violently, and Ada felt her stomach drop as the vehicle tilted further. She gripped the seat in front of her with all her strength, her heart pounding in her chest. God, help us, she cried out, her voice trembling. The bus finally came to a stop, but the damage had already been done. The students were thrown into chaos, some of them crying, others clutching their injuries. The air was filled with the sound of groans and panicked whispers. Ada looked around, her vision blurry from tears. She saw Chaik lying on the floor, holding his arm, which was bent at an unnatural angle. Tola was slumped against a seat, her face pale, and Ikena was clutching his head, blood trickling down his forehead. Is everyone okay? Ada called out, her voice shaky. There were murmurs of pain and fear, but no one gave a clear answer. Ada took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. She knew she had to stay strong, even though she was just as scared as everyone else. Help is coming, she said, her voice trembling but determined. We're going to be okay. Just hold on. The bus was eerily quiet now, except for the sounds of heavy rain outside and the groans of injured students inside. The once lively group of friends who had filled the air with jokes and laughter were now scattered, injured, and frightened. Ada sat on her knees in the narrow aisle, trembling as she tried to calm herself. Her heart raced as she glanced around the wrecked bus, taking in the faces of her classmates. Is anyone badly hurt? Ada called out, her voice shaky but loud enough to cut through the silence. There were murmurs from different corners of the bus. My leg. I can't move my leg, Tola whimpered from the back. Her voice was thin and filled with pain. My head, Ikena groaned. leaning against a seat with blood trickling down the side of his face. Chaik lay sprawled near the middle of the bus, cradling his arm that was twisted at an odd angle. He winced as he tried to sit up. "Ada," he called weakly, his voice barely audible. "What do we do now?" Ada didn't have an answer. She closed her eyes tightly, her lips moving in a silent prayer. Then, gathering her courage, she looked at them and said firmly, "We'll get through this. We just have to stay calm." The driver groaned as he pushed himself up from his seat. His forehead was bleeding, but he seemed to be okay otherwise. He looked around the bus and shook his head. "This is bad," he muttered. "Sir, can you call for help?" Ada asked, crawling toward him. The driver pulled out his phone and frowned. "There's no signal here," he said. "This area is too remote." Ada felt her heart sink, but she didn't let the fear show on her face. Instead, she turned to the others. "We have to work together," she said. "We can't give up now." Chaik tried to sit up again, gritting his teeth as pain shot through his arm. "Ada, I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't been acting like a fool earlier, maybe this wouldn't have happened." "It's not your fault, Chaik," Ada said gently. "None of us could have predicted this. What matters now is that we help each other." Tola, tears streaming down her face, looked at Ada. "How can we help each other when we can't even move? My leg is stuck. I can't do anything." Ada crawled over to her, examining her leg. It was pinned under a seat, but it didn't look broken. "I'll help you get free," she said, trying to sound confident even though her hands were shaking. With the driver's help, Ada managed to push the seat just enough for Tola to pull her leg out. Tola cried out in pain but nodded when Ada asked if she could move her toes. "It hurts, but I think I'll be okay," Tola said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I canna," still holding his bleeding head, called out weakly. "Ada, what about me? I don't think I can stop the bleeding." Ada crawled over to him and tore a strip of fabric from the hem of her dress. "This might hurt a little," she said as she pressed the cloth against the wound to stop the bleeding. Akena winced but didn't complain. "Thank you," he muttered. Meanwhile, Chaik was struggling to stand. His injured arm hung limp at his side, and his face was pale. "Ada, I can't just sit here," he said, his voice strained. "I need to do something. I need to help." "Chaik, you're hurt," Ada said firmly. "You need to rest." "But I can't just." "You can help by staying still and saving your strength," Ada interrupted. Her tone was calm but firm, and Chaik nodded reluctantly, sinking back into his seat. The driver stood near the front of the bus, scanning the area outside through the cracked windshield. "The rain is letting up a little," he said. "Maybe I can find help." "You're leaving?" Tola asked, her voice panicked. "I have to," the driver replied. "We can't stay here all night. I'll walk to the nearest village and get help." Ada looked at him, worry etched on her face. "Are you sure it's safe to go alone? What if something happens to you?" The driver hesitated but then nodded. "I'll be fine. Just stay inside the bus and wait for me. I'll come back as soon as I can." As the driver left, the students were plunged into an uneasy silence. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the storm inside the bus hadn't settled. "Do you think he'll really come back?" Akena asked quietly. Ada nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. "We have to trust that he will." "And if he doesn't?" Tola asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we'll figure something out," Ada said firmly. "But for now, we wait." The minutes felt like hours as the students sat in the dark, broken bus. Some of them whispered prayers, while others just sat silently, lost in their thoughts. Chaik stared at the floor, his mind racing with guilt and regret. "Ada," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Yes," she replied, turning to look at him. "I don't know how you're staying so calm," Chaik said, his voice trembling. "I'm scared out of my mind. And you're here helping everyone like it's nothing?" "I'm scared too," Ada admitted. "But I know that panicking won't help anyone. The only thing I can do is pray and keep moving forward." Tola wiped her eyes and looked at Ada. "Do you really think God is watching us right now? After everything that's happened?" "Yes," Ada said without hesitation. "I believe he is. I believe he's the reason we're still alive. But why would he let this happen in the first place? Tola asked, her voice cracking. I don't know, Ada admitted. But I believe that even in the worst situations, he's still there, guiding us. The students fell silent again, each of them lost in their thoughts. The storm outside had finally stopped, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the trees in the wind. Chaik leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. If we get out of this, he said quietly, I swear I'll never take anything for granted again. I'll be a better person. Ada smiled faintly. I think we all have a lot to learn from this. The sound of footsteps crunching on wet gravel broke the uneasy silence inside the bus. The students sat up straight, their eyes darting toward the door. Ada was the first to speak, her voice steady but laced with hope. Is that him? Is the driver back? Chaik, still cradling his injured arm, shifted in his seat. I hope so. I can't take sitting here much longer. Tola leaned forward, squinting toward the front of the bus. What if it's not him? What if it's someone else? Someone else? Ikenna snapped. Like who, Tola? A ghost. Tola shot him a glare. I'm just saying, we don't know what's out there. Before anyone could respond, the driver's familiar figure appeared in the doorway, soaked to the bone but holding a flashlight. Relief swept through the bus like a wave. Thank God, Ada whispered under her breath. The driver stepped inside, shaking water off his jacket. I found help, he said, his voice tired but firm. There's a village not too far from here. They're sending people to assist us. How long will it take for them to get here? Chaik asked quickly, his voice tinged with impatience. Not long, the driver replied. They're coming with a truck and a few people who know first aid. Just hold on a little longer. The students sighed collectively, their fear momentarily replaced with relief. Ada looked around at her classmates, her expression softening. You see? Help is on the way. We just need to stay calm. Ikenna leaned back against his seat, exhaling loudly. Finally, I thought we were going to be stuck here forever. Tola, who had been quiet since the driver's return, spoke up hesitantly. What if they can't get us all out? What if someone doesn't make it? No one is being left behind, Ada said firmly, her voice filled with quiet determination. We've come this far together. We're all getting out of here. Chaik nodded in agreement. Ada's right. We've been through enough already. This is just another challenge we have to face. Minutes felt like hours as the students waited, the tension in the air still thick despite the driver's reassurance. Ada moved around the bus as best as she could, checking on her classmates one by one. How are you holding up? She asked Tola, kneeling beside her. Tola shrugged, wiping tears from her face. My leg still hurts, but I think it's okay. I'm just scared. I've never been this scared in my life. Ada placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's okay to be scared, Tola, but you're not alone. We're all in this together. Tola nodded, her lip trembling. Thanks, Ada. I don't know how you're staying so calm through all this. Ada gave her a small smile. I'm not as calm as I look. I just know that panicking won't help anyone. We have to stay strong for each other. At the back of the bus, Chaik was trying to adjust his position to ease the pain in his arm. Ikenna noticed and frowned. You okay, man? Your arm looks really bad. Chaik winced but nodded. I'll survive. I just wish I could do more to help. You've done enough, Ikenna said, surprising both Chaik and himself. I mean, you apologized to Ada. You've been trying to keep us together. That's more than I've done. Chaik smirked despite the pain. Look at you, giving me compliments. Who would have thought? Don't get used to it, Ikenna said, cracking a small smile. The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted their conversation. The students perked up, their eyes widening with hope. They're here, the driver announced, standing up and heading toward the door. The students watched as a group of men and women from the village climbed into the bus, carrying flashlights and medical kits. One of them, an older woman with a kind face, knelt beside Ada. Are you the one keeping everyone calm? She asked with a gentle smile. Ada nodded, feeling a little shy. I'm just trying to help, The woman patted her shoulder. You've done well. We'll take it from here. The villagers moved quickly, assessing injuries and helping the students out of the bus one by one. Ada stayed behind, refusing to leave until everyone else was safe. Go, Ada, Chaik said as two men helped him out of his seat. You've done enough. Let them take care of you too. I'm not leaving until everyone is out, Ada replied firmly. Chaik gave her a small smile. You're something else, you know that? As the last of the students were led out of the bus, Ada finally allowed herself to be helped. The villagers guided them to the waiting truck, where blankets and water were being distributed. Chaik, now seated on the truck bed with his arm in a makeshift sling, looked around at his classmates. We made it, he said softly. We did, Ada agreed, sitting beside him. Tola, her leg propped up on a crate, leaned forward. Thanks to you, Ada. You kept us together when everything was falling apart. Ada shook her head. It wasn't just me. We all worked together. That's what got us through. As the truck rumbled toward the village, the students sat in silence, each of them reflecting on the ordeal. They were bruised, battered, and exhausted, but they were alive. And for the first time, they understood the importance of humility, faith, and unity. The truck rumbled along the bumpy road as it carried the injured students toward the village. The air was quiet, heavy with the weight of what had happened. No one spoke much, and the only sounds were the engine and the occasional cough or groan from one of the students. The villagers who had come to help rode alongside them, watching over the injured with care. Ada sat at the back of the truck, her eyes scanning the faces of her classmates. Most of them were still shaken, their faces pale and their eyes distant. Chaik was beside her, his arm in a sling, staring down at his feet. Tola sat nearby, her legs stretched out with a bandage wrapped around her knee, while Ikenna leaned against the side of the truck, his head wrapped in a clean white cloth. For a while, no one said a word. The silence felt almost too loud, like it was pressing down on them. Finally, Tola broke it, her voice soft and hesitant. Ada, she said, her eyes fixed on her hands. How did you stay so strong back there? I mean, with everything that was happening, you didn't even cry. Ada turned to her, her expression thoughtful. I did cry, Tola. You just didn't see it. I was just as scared as everyone else. But I prayed, and it helped me stay calm. Tola nodded slowly, her face full of regret. I wish I had done the same. Instead, I spent the whole trip making fun of you. She paused, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, Ada. I really am. Ada reached out and placed a hand on Tola's shoulder. You don't have to keep apologizing. I forgave you a long time ago. What matters is that we're all here now. Chaik, who had been quiet until now, let out a deep sigh. She's right, he said, his voice low. We're here and that's a miracle. We should have listened to you from the start. Ada looked at him, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. Chaik, you don't have to keep blaming yourself. But I do, Chaik insisted, meeting her gaze. I acted like an idiot. I thought I knew everything, but I didn't. If we had prayed before the trip, maybe things would have been different. You can't change the past, Ada said gently, but you can learn from it. That's what's important. Chaik nodded, his jaw tight. I have learned. I'll never take things like this lightly again. As the truck entered the village, the students looked around at the simple houses and the people who had gathered to greet them. The villagers had prepared a small area with mats and blankets where the students could rest. The truck came to a stop, and the villagers helped the students climb down one by one. Welcome, said an elderly man who seemed to be the village leader. His voice was warm, and his eyes were full of kindness. You're safe now. Rest here while we call for more help. The students nodded gratefully, some of them too tired to speak. They settled onto the mats, leaning against each other for support. Ada sat next to Chaik, who was cradling his injured arm, his face still pale. After a while, the village leader returned with a phone in his hand. I've called your school and some medical workers, he said. They'll be here soon to take you the rest of the way. The students murmured their thanks, relief washing over their faces. While we wait, the village leader continued. his gaze sweeping over the group. Would anyone like to share what happened? Sometimes, talking helps ease the burden. Chaik glanced at Ada, then slowly raised his good hand. I'll talk, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The villagers and students turned their attention to him. Chaik took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with emotion. We messed up, he began. We were warned, but we didn't listen. We thought we were too smart, too cool to care about things like prayer or being careful. And because of that, we almost lost everything. His voice cracked, and he looked down at his lap. I've never been so scared in my life. But through it all, Ada never gave up. She prayed for us even after we mocked her. She stayed strong when the rest of us were falling apart. If it weren't for her, I don't know if we'd all be sitting here right now. Ada felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Chaik, it wasn't just me, she said quickly. We all worked together. We all prayed in the end. But you led us, Chaik said, his tone firm. You showed us what it means to have faith. And for that, I'll always be grateful. The other students nodded in agreement, their expressions full of admiration and gratitude. Tola wiped her eyes, and Ikena muttered, he's right. Ada, you were our rock out there. Ada looked around at her classmates, her heart swelling with emotion. Thank you, she said softly, but I couldn't have done it without all of you. We made it through because we worked together. That's what matters. The village leader smiled warmly. It sounds like you've all learned something important. Sometimes, it takes a storm to remind us of what really matters. Faith, humility, and the strength we find in each other. The students nodded, their faces thoughtful. Not long after, the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. A few vans and ambulances pulled into the village, and a group of teachers and medical workers stepped out. The students let out sighs of relief as their teachers rushed to them, their faces full of concern. You're safe now, one of the teachers said, her voice trembling with emotion. We're so glad you're all okay. The medical workers began tending to the injured, carefully helping them into the ambulances. Ada stayed close to her classmates, making sure everyone was accounted for before climbing into one of the vans herself. As the vehicles made their way back to the school, the mood inside was quiet but hopeful. The students exchanged small smiles, their bond stronger than ever. When they finally arrived at the school gates, the principal was waiting for them, her face lined with worry. She rushed to meet them, her voice filled with relief. Thank God you're all safe. The students were ushered inside, where they were given food, blankets, and a chance to rest. Ada sat with Chaik, Tola, and Ikena, their earlier fears replaced with a sense of gratitude. A few days later, the principal called a special assembly. The students gathered in the hall, eager to hear what she had to say. Ada, Chaik, Tola, and Ikena sat together in the front row, their injuries healing but their memories of the ordeal still fresh. The principal stood at the podium, her gaze sweeping over the room. Today we have a lesson to learn, she began. A lesson about humility, faith, and the power of unity. She invited Ada to the stage, and the room fell silent as the young girl stepped forward. Ada took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. What happened to us was scary, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. But it taught us something important. We're stronger when we stand together. And no matter how tough things get, we can always find hope if we have faith. The hall erupted in applause, and Ada stepped back, her heart full of gratitude. She glanced at Chaik, Tola, and Ikena, who were smiling at her proudly.